Innotribe, please welcome founder of C2P and co-founder and managing partner of SmartFin Capital, Jürgen Engels.
Hi, good afternoon and welcome on this session for platforms and APIs. So I'm going to be your moderator for the day, and let me start maybe first by introducing the different guests. First, Chris. Give Chris a warm round of applause, please. Our next speaker will be Stefan. Stefan from Fidor Bank. Give Stefan an applause, please. Then we have Dan from Silicon Valley Bank. Leda from Bank of New York Mellon. And last but not least, Adize of Level 39. So Chris, we're going to talk about APIs, so can I ask you please to come here and talk us about the context of APIs and start with that, please. Sure. Thanks.
All right, I want to tell you a tale of API interoperability and the challenges that another industry had in trying to achieve this as a way for us to ask some challenging questions about how financial services should try to do this. I do a lot of innovation work with the healthcare industry, and about a decade ago, the healthcare industry saw the emergence of the Internet of Medical Things. And with the emergence of the Internet of Medical Things, for the first time, the industry really started to face this issue of how do we determine interoperability of these medical things as they emerge? So what happened is you had some of the leaders in the industry. You had Intel, IBM, Roche from the pharmaceutical industries, partners from the healthcare provider, United Healthcare from the payer industry, and they all got together and they created an organization made up of big companies called Continua Health Alliance. And the Continua Health Alliance said, we will determine, dictate, and mandate certain standards for interoperability that everyone can then use to enable this ecosystem of interoperable medical devices to talk to one another. They spent 6 years doing this, and after 6 years, almost nobody was following the standards, including these companies that had been the founders of this. But concurrent with this, we then had a bottoms-up approach emerge. We ended up having startup companies like Fitbit, Jawbone, MapMyFitness, YThings, Strava, and others that said, you know what, we don't need big companies to tell us what standards should be for interoperability. We can actually develop APIs, we can share them with other people in the ecosystem, and by using an organic bottoms-up approach, we can achieve interoperability. The amazing thing is that during the 6 years the big companies tried to impose a top-down structure, which never worked, the small companies from the bottoms up created this open API architecture that actually worked and delivered the interoperability the big companies sought. So I'm going to throw out here for discussion today among all the different panelists, which will it be in this industry? Will it be a top-down big bank imposed structure that enables interoperability? Or will it be a more organic bottoms-up approach that will enable small companies to really drive the emergence of new standards? Or will it be some sort of hybrid of the two? So with that context, I'll turn it over to Stefan.
Okay. Welcome. My name is Stefan Weiß. I'm the one who's responsible for the API program at the Fidor Bank. Fidor Bank is a full registered bank for retail and corporate customers. We were founded in 2007 when the bank crisis was on its peak. And back then we aimed to change banking, and to a certain degree we already did. Today I want to show you how our approaches to platforms is and how APIs are an integral part of it. Are there any developers here? Sorry, I won't go into technical details or show any showcase. This is about our platforms and how we get along with it. So, for us, platforms is a way to enabling partnerships. We give knowledge, we give technology, and sometimes even license sheltering to existing and to new businesses We enable
Yeah. Okay.
fintech. Platforms help us to leverage
Yeah. Okay.
existing businesses by sharing our customer base or our community members. Platforms help accelerating processes. We provide standards and ready-to-use modules. And most important, monetizing. We provide revenue share models and services to actually collect the money. So we use partnership on a very broad level, but this is for purpose. We even refer to our retail customers as our partners. We invented the term of community banking. That includes that we discuss many of our decisions as a bank with our customers first. So we partner up with our customers. We try to be the listening bank. We try to solve problems of our customers and not the problems of the bank. That includes this includes the help of service providers that help us to broaden our services to better meet the needs of our customers. This is what we API needs for. So APIs made, if done properly, all this a plug-and-play business. We come from a background of internet service providers and internet companies. So it was for us always obvious to use APIs to give access to our services. But we had to learn our lessons as well. So we created, back in the days, a RESTful API based on JSON format. And as of today, that was still a good decision. And we created APIs to give access to our internal services for our internal use. And we created custom-tailored APIs for our partners. But at least this decision soon turned out to be something that is unmatchable. Piling up partner APIs is a sure way to doom. So 2 years ago, we decided to build public standard APIs instead. APIs that are public and standard, as I said, and we treat them as products. So what does public mean? Anyone can access these APIs and use them as when he is a customer and an account at Fidor. And the ones who do not have an account at Fidor have still access to full documentation and can play around with the sandbox, which is for testing and debugging anyways, good idea. And the advantages of standards is clear. It's about efficiency. But standard does not necessarily mean one size fits all. It means a good standard API has to be modular and extensible. So the main use cases for our APIs are innovation, automation, third-party service integration, and our white label offering, what we call no-stack banking. So APIs are only one element out of the service range that we offer to our customers. But for, in particular, corporate customers, for many corporate customers, APIs are the decisive element. The modularity and the openness allow them to experiment and to innovate. And the standards allow them to integrate in a quickly way. So, and I'm not talking about remote controlling your account, I'm talking about integration of really of business processes and value chains. We also use APIs to integrate third-party offerings into the account. What you see here, what we call in-account apps. What you see here is a bank account as personal, as feature-rich, as flexible as a smartphone. This is the upcoming App Store that belongs to it. We constantly add new apps that help spend or save your money, that help you make the right decision in insurances, and even help you just having fun and wasting time. So in a nutshell, apps that will make your life better. I say, when you believe that a bank account should be only for banking, then probably you believe that a smartphone, that a mobile phone should be only for making phone calls. But this is only one step. The next step will be an open platform where all kinds of financial apps can be exchanged, and the usage is not only restricted to customers of Fidor, but to other banks as well, and even non-banks. So, and this is probably the most powerful platform we have to offer. It's our white labeling solution, and to make it short, because time runs, this is our banking as a service idea, not idea, this is the banking as a service that completely runs in the cloud. And there, on behalf of our partners, we offer the full stack of financial services, even take care of the regulatory issues of the customer. And the point is, whatever front end you need, it is built on top of the APIs. So, to round it up, for us, partnerships are the most effective way to keep up with innovation, to fight commoditization with new revenue models, and to meet the expectations of the customers as today and tomorrow. Platforms are the most effective way to manage all these partnerships, and APIs are the only way to connect to these platforms. Thank you for your attention. Jürgen?
So thank you, Stefan, for that. I mean, it's very clear if you look at this that we're talking really about an ecosystem where there are different players or different segments. We talked about the banks, that's the story we heard. We are going to talk about gateways a bit later. We're also going to talk about developers that play a very important role into this, that are building these apps. And finally, we're also going to talk about the customer. I mean, we heard the story, this nice story about the bank Fidor, but I'm pretty sure that there are still other examples. So let me maybe now invite you to search for other examples of banks that also have these kind of tools. Now, in order to do that, I would like to first ask the panel to have a bit of information about what other banks do they know, and then after that we're going to go into the public to see what kind of banks we have, and the purpose here is to have as many different banks like Fidor Bank that are working with API. So guys in the panel, any suggestions that you know of banks that are also doing similar things?
BBVA. BBVA, for example.
Okay. BBVA, okay.
Yeah.
Just hold on a second that we have some time to write it down.
We're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay, keep going.
Silicon Valley Bank.
Dan?
My institution, Silicon Valley Bank.
Okay.
And my institution, BNY Mellon.
Okay. You don't have an institution. So
I don't have an. I'm not from a bank, but I put Fidor forward.
Being at the API days 2 weeks ago, I saw Steve Graham from Teller.io, and he, as a hacker, says, actually, all banks have open APIs.
Well, I think if we put all banks onto that, then our game is over. So I'm not think that's the purpose. So any other suggestions from the panel, or should we move to the people here to see if there are any banks or any suggestions that they have? There must be other banks. Yes, sir? Maybe just tell you who you are.
In Luxembourg, we have DigiCash. It's a white labeling product providing payment initiation through mobile apps.
Okay, DigiCash, that's a good one. Anything else? AXA in France. Sorry? Sir? Sparling Bank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Any idea on what they're doing through the API?
It's all about the branchless banking now. So every bank has their own theory as to how it's going to be approached, and you know, as far as a consumer level is concerned for the retail side, how is that going to look? You know, but again, there has to be a divide between B2B services and consumer-facing services. And
Okay, thanks. Any other bankers here in the room that want to explain what their bank is doing in that field? Come on, I mean, it's full of bankers here, supposed to be, so. Anybody?
I know that Lloyds uses a lot of APIs, but not openly.
Okay.
Of course, most banks do.
I know that Crédit Agricole just is also part of that, so maybe you can add that one as well.
Deutsche Bank has a API.
Okay. There must be more, eh? Come on. Nobody? Okay, so that's it. Then we move on. And we actually move on, when you look into this ecosystem, you actually see this gateways standing there. You have a couple of examples of interesting gateways, Yodlee, Braintree, Stripe. And so I invite Dan now to come on stage and to talk to us about what is a gateway and how does it work. Dan?
Thanks, Jürgen. So my name is Dan Kimmerling, and I'm responsible, like Stefan, for delivering API banking at Silicon Valley Bank. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Silicon Valley Bank, we're a top 50 bank in the United States, and our mission is to be the bank of the innovation economy. What does that mean? We bank the vast majority of all venture-backed startups in the United States. We also bank a large percentage of them in the UK through our branch there. We also have an operation in China, Israel, etc. One thing about the innovation economy is it never slows down. It always speeds up. I actually became involved with SVB because I was running a startup called Standard Treasury, which was actually part of the Innotribe startup competition last year. And we were actually bought by Silicon Valley Bank earlier this year to bring API banking into the fold of the institution. We were a gateway. What are gateways? Gateways are generally resellers of products and services that banks provide, and in the reselling, they add their own unique value.
Okay.
I think a lot of people who are in the banking business are really worried about the D word, the disruption word. You know, everyone is worried, what is the future of their institution? And they look to gateways, and you can look at marketplace lenders as gateways, you can look as Forex providers as gateways. And they really worry, is the future of the banking business these non-banking disruptors? Ultimately, what I've come here to share is a few things about how you can work with gateways. There's this perception, I think, in the marketplace that gateways don't need banks. And this is just a flawed perception. Ultimately, gateways and banks form a symbiotic relationship that promotes financial innovation. So Yodlee resells bank data. The bank owns the data that Yodlee sells. Yodlee adds their own value by aggregating data across banks. Braintree and Stripe simply resell merchant acquiring solutions that are offered by banks in the United States. Even Lending Club, which I think many people would argue is a very disruptive approach, they don't actually sell very much. A bank actually issues the loan, and then Lending Club is the platform by which those loans get resold to various members of the capital markets. So what I would want to advocate to all of you in the room is that banks and gateways need to partner with each other to ultimately provide value to the customer. And that it is the banks that are most able to partner with gateways that will win the most share. And I'll be the first to tell you, I look to Fidor as a great model of how you can think about the unbundling of your own institution to take the gateway partnership model to the next level. I think another aspect of this, though, is that the risk, compliance, and governance model for how you interact with gateways is still at the cutting edge. And at SVB, we believe that it is only through deep technical integration with our gateway partners that we can really manage the risk that is associated with exposing ourselves to the risks associated with intermediaries. Because a gateway will intermediate the relationship, but we believe that the risks associated with that intermediation, the risks associated with the added compliance, KYC, AML, and many other acronyms are worth it because gateways can provide unique value adds that we as an institution, one, can't, and two, shouldn't ever provide. It's not our core competency. So maybe to wrap up, what I would say is ultimately it is through gateways that banks will be able to work with many more customers and really supercharge their return on equity. And that gateways and these disruptors are as much enablers of financial institutions as they are existential threats. And that for us, the way we've been able to manage the risk and compliance challenges is through deep technical integration using APIs. Thank you.
Okay, Dan, thanks for that. Let's go back to the activity now, and similar to what we've done with the banks, looking for all kinds of gateways that are existing in this space. So please again, panel, do you have any other suggestions than the ones that were mentioned before, so that we can write them down?
Oh, go ahead.
So marketplace lenders.
Marketplace lenders?
You know, Lending Club, SoFi.
Just hold on.
Etc.
Let's make sure that she has time to write them down. Lending Club, okay. Guys, any other suggestions?
For example, Xignite.
Xignite, yes, good example.
Yodely.
Apigee.
Apigee.
Triascale.
Okay, do you get that one? Triascale. Any others from the public? Anybody, any suggestions? I have the mic here. Anybody wants to talk about some gateways that they have or that they use as a bank or that they're looking for to use potentially?
Probably should make the difference between what gateway and gateway.
Nobody? Adisa, do you have any more suggestions maybe?
No, I just have a comment. I think that it's interesting that we're here in a room full of people who they're seeking to learn more about APIs, and they might not necessarily have the examples right now, but hopefully we run this next year, and they're full of examples of API players that they work with.
But at least we have some, we have some to start with. All right, so let's move on now to the next part, which is going back to the ecosystem, the developer part. And again, I invite Dan to talk about what the developers are doing in that space, what they're looking for, and how development actually leads to apps. Dan, I'll give you back the floor.
Thanks, Jürgen. As I was saying before, the relationship with Standard Treasury and Silicon Valley Bank was a very unique one. And, you know, we, as an institution, actually appointed a chief digital officer earlier this year who spearheaded the acquisition of my company, Standard Treasury, into Silicon Valley Bank. And I'll be the first to tell you that it's a fascinating cultural question around how do banks bring in world-class technical talent that can deliver on the promise, the value associated with APIs. I was joking, how many people in the room know what IRC is? IRC is a very old school technical protocol that software engineers use for chat. It's called Internet Relay Chat. And being able to actually, for example, provide support to your developer customer via Internet Relay Chat 24/7, you know, that takes a lot of work to bring the culture of the banking institution up to the point where they can understand that the developer is the critical customer. The developer makes the decision what bank to work with. Everything about how banks are built is around selling to CFOs and treasurers. Ultimately, in a developer-driven community, it is developers that will be deciding. And so I want to spend the next 5 minutes talking about 2 or 3 really critical things. I want to talk about culture, I want to talk about marketing, and I want to talk about the developer promise. When I talk about culture, I look at everything about the way the banking business works is a complete turn-off to software engineers. You have to get to the office at a certain time and work 9 to 5. Some of the best software engineers I know work 2 to 10, right? They work when they want to work. The idea that you would wear a suit and tie, I was joking yesterday that I wanted to wear a shirt that says, if you can't ship, you don't add value. If you don't write code, you have no purpose, right? I think there's a complete, and so just the entire way that the software engineers we all want to recruit, the software engineers who are at Google and Facebook and the most world-class technical institutions, or who are coming out of the most technically adroit universities, we need to change the culture of banks to make them interesting for software engineers, world-class technical talent, or we need to buy them through acquisitions, and we can talk about how to do that successfully. I think BNY Mellon is doing some very cutting-edge stuff there, and we should talk about that. I think the second thing I want to talk about is marketing. I think the way in which banks have marketed themselves is not a way in which developers who are making buying decisions, they care about. And I don't know if any of you read this, but you should all start reading Hacker News. Hacker News is where software engineers hang out on the internet. And if Hacker News is not one of the first 3 websites you read every day, then you're probably not marketing to software engineers very effectively. So the way in which we think about finding and acquiring customers and finding and acquiring talent, the 2 most critical things for a bank, that has to change in a developer-driven purchasing model. I think the third thing, and this is the most important thing, is the developer promise. Anyone who works with software engineers knows that they are the most cynical people in the world. No one has more cynicism than software engineers. And ultimately, if you break the promises you make to them, they all know about it. Twitter, a company I think many of us would regard as highly successful, broke their promises to developers, and it's taken them years to recover. LinkedIn, earlier this year, broke the promise they made to developers when they opened features in their API, and the vitriol against LinkedIn on the internet, and especially in Silicon Valley, has been extremely strong. So when you make a promise to developers and you instantiate that promise to developers in your API and the documentation you provide to them, you can't go back on it. You owe them 5 years of committing to those decisions. So please, when you're shipping APIs, don't take those decisions lightly. Microsoft supports their APIs for 10 years, and they guarantee it contractually. I'd like to see a bank, engage in that level of contractual obligation to developers. So we can talk all about developer culture, and I'll be outside talking about it for as long as people want. But ultimately, if you want to fulfill on the promise of APIs, you have to change how the culture of your institution, how you market to developers, and you need to know that when you ship an API, you're making a promise, and that promise means something, and breaking that promise shouldn't be done lightly. Jürgen?
All right, thanks, Dan. I think we learned a lot from a development perspective. So, and actually some of the things were also mentioned already. So what is actually a developer looking for? I heard flexible hours. I'm not sure if that was written. I also heard easiness to attract good people from that perspective, and flexibility all over the place. So any other suggestions that we haven't heard yet from Dan in terms of what a developer should look for or what he wants? I would say security, but
there is an element of the creativity that we forget to think about. But one of the things that in years past my developer teams had found most frustrating is the fact that you ask them to code an inelegant solution to a problem that wouldn't be there if you allowed them to think about the process and the business side. And what the platform economics are doing, what the API restack of the business is doing, is that those of us on the business side are thinking about what it is we're delivering, who we're delivering it to, and how we're delivering it for the years to come, and saying the way we used to do it won't cut it for long. We need to do all of this differently. And you're putting the developer front and center in a way that had never happened before. And you're saying to the developer, solve this differently. And the creativity that comes into this is fascinating. We at BNY Mellon have completely changed the way we see how we deliver what we deliver. We have a new ecosystem, API-driven delivery, an app store for third-party integration. That has made it suddenly, but very fundamentally, very easy, or much easier, for us to hire amazing developers who would not have wanted to work in finance before. Not us, just not the industry. Because the creativity and the possibility to actually pick up the problem and completely unbundle it and rebundle it is something that matters to developers. But to just pick up on what Dan said, now the organization needs to learn. I remember when I first started working in this industry in a different company, I had to explain to one of my developers that some of our colleagues who were on the business side got extremely upset that he never topped and tailed his emails with dear so-and-so and regards and good morning and things like that. And he told me that, it's a waste of time. And I sort of raised an eyebrow and all the rest of it. And I said, dude, it's a non-optional social convention. And he said, oh, okay. And walked away happy because he knew where it fitted into the world. The organization now needs to start understanding the world in that language. And one of the things that we are doing on the back of having built our stack is teaching our organization to go and be digital. But that doesn't just mean understanding digitally native products. It means seeing the world in a way that needs to make much more sense to a developer. The developer who feels that you are that organization will come and bring his friends.
Yeah.
I think to add to that, it also is about the problem you're solving. So developers really want to make sure they're solving problems that are critical to the business challenge. They don't want to solve problems which are small. They want to solve big problems. And finance currently has an issue attracting developer talent into that. One thing that we've seen a lot at Level 39 in Canary Wharf in London is different organizations from some of the organizations around here bringing their internal hackathons for their own developer community, but also opening up their APIs and asking developers to come in and being open about it properly. Not having a tokenistic, this is just marketing, but actually this is to solve business challenges. And I think when it's taken to the forefront of the business, that's when it's more important and gets more interesting, rather than it just being marketing.
Okay, we have somebody here also who wants to say something.
Yeah, I would just like to add, great developers like to work on great code. So if you're providing and showing them a really archaic, old base and say, hey, we're going to be working on top of this, you won't be able to hire good talent.
Yeah, so it's really a matter of making sure that from a development cycle, you have it under control and that you can easily do small iterations on your software and release it step by step. So, you want anything to add?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Eric from Credits. I think it's important to point out that instead of having developers adding on to legacy stacks or whatever it is, it's all about going to the core root of the issue. And so instead of having developers putting lipstick on the pig and continuing to do so, it's making them obviously want to seek out something more innovative and get them doing their own thing and starting their own companies. And we're seeing a really big change right now. And where the banks and financial institutions were able to lock all the very good developers down in the past, that's not the case anymore. So there's an interesting divide. And I think we really need to start, having the developers getting rid of the scar tissue.
And I think if I can slightly cannibalize what you just said, the reason you had silence when you were asking about API-driven businesses and platforms is essentially that a lot of financial organizations are using APIs internally. They have some semblance of a platform with app-style functionality on it, but very few have restacked their business model to support that. So although they use some of the capabilities, it will never come to its full fruition culturally or technologically, because fundamentally the decision to move to a platform API-driven business is huge. And I'm saying that having gone through it as an organization ourselves. It's a very big commitment at the heart of the business. You can use APIs, but that doesn't make you an API business. And I think that was the reticence in the room. We can name a lot of companies that use them, but not a lot of companies that live and breathe them.
Okay. One thing I would add to that, and Stefan mentioned it, is if you're going to embrace APIs, you need to embrace API first. So at SVB, we're in the process of using the same APIs that we externalize for our own internal applications, which means that our external APIs are a first-class peer. They're the same code as what we use internally. And it's only through making sure that our APIs are a world-class product that we can then ensure that we are building a next-generation platform on these great fundamentals.
All right, thank you. Well, we have a very good slide here with a lot of stuff on it. So I suggest we go back to the ecosystem, and then obviously to the last part of it, which is the customer. So Leda, I invite you to talk about the customer here.
You've heard of the customer, that's fantastic. So I'm going to talk about the customer in two ways, because for those of you who know what BNY Mellon does, you know that we're not a retail player. For those of you who don't, you're in luck. We have some of our best people here in this conference, so you can collar us and we can talk to you all about what we do. But if you think fundamentally about your banking, we tend to be at the back of your bank and support infrastructurally everything that your bank does. What does that mean? That means that for a very long time, what happened at the retail end took a long time to come to us. That doesn't happen anymore. Digital banking, the fact that you carry software in your pocket, means that that value chain and chain reaction is much faster. It also means that as a retail user, you get used to certain things. You hold your phone and it behaves a certain way. And then you go to work and you want the interfaces and the systems you play with to behave the same way, that same frictionless experience. And that has fundamentally transformed how we were thinking about our business. So we started thinking about interoperability, delivering what we deliver in terms of services and functions to our clients in a way that is slick and channel agnostic and malleable at the other end. And the first surprise when we did that in an iterative manner quite a few years ago was the fact that our more cutting edge customers said, APIs, I don't care about UI, I care about APIs. Now, the value of agile, right? We found that out pretty early on in the journey. But going back to our business to say the client wants to consume the data differently meant that we had to ask a whole host of questions about the why and the what next. Because if you said, okay, APIs, go and code a sort of a channel that takes what you used to have to your client in just a different way, you would end up with a lot of code that wouldn't do what you needed to do. So in order to deliver to the client in this brand new way, two things needed to happen. One, we needed to get close to our customers in a very different way. We needed to get close to how they consumed our services down their own value chain and through to the deep ends of their organizations, and then out the other end to their customers. We needed to understand their future in a way that was very often amorphous, because we needed to be in position to be supporting that future in 5 years' time, and in many cases they hadn't built that. And that's the hardest part, because opportunity up close always looks like hard work. We had to be prepared to rethink the entire infrastructure of our organization. And as you look at the value chain of banking, and I'm sure my colleagues on that side will agree, on the retail end, it is easier to consume more APIs than you produce. But as you come further and further into the sort of deeper end, that's not possible. If you're in the infrastructure business, you actually need to provide the infrastructure this is going to be based on. In our case, we didn't have to guess. We went to our customers and they said, this is what the future looks like. But it takes effort and it takes a lot of work and a lot of restacking. Will you do it? To me, coming from a fintech startup environment, the fact that the organization said we will do it was exciting. It's why I joined, it's why I stayed. But it means that the customer remains at the center of this front to end, because you're dealing developer, to Dan's earlier point, and that's a radically new culture. You unbundle the services you used to provide. The customer drives the purchasing behavior, which is in a financial services world is new. We've always thought of ourselves as client-centric, but actually products tend to be packaged. When you move into the API universe, you have already accepted that products will be unbundled and the customer will drive how they consume. That changes everything from how you stack your organization at the back end to how you staff, to how you price and everything else. So just to reiterate Dan's point, the client wants this, but the commitment to delivering this has to be total.
Right, Leda, thanks for that. I think we now move to the last speaker, Adize. And one of the things that we haven't really touched upon here in this theme is actually the business model. What is the existing business models and how can actually parties make money out all of this? And I think, Adize, that's something you're going to talk about to us. Adize from Level 39.
So who knows what Level 39 is? Okay, a few of you in the room. We are based in Canary Wharf, and daily we work with over 200 startup companies that are driving the fintech agenda, but also a number of other themes in the technology industry. APIs are a recurring theme that is coming more and more when we are seeing new startups that are applying to be at Level 39. I'm just going to take you through a number of different use cases and examples of where the API economy is booming. In this room, you might not be aware that this summer, Ignite actually launched a fintech revolution ecosystem. This brings together over 21 innovators who are actually across the industry looking at how you can engage with developers and have the best of breed of financial APIs. Ignite is a startup company that has actually been playing in this space for a number of years. They understand what it means to be data-driven, and they are making sure that the APIs that are focused on are currently to do with workflow, analytics, and data. But there are a number of other API areas that they're looking to go into. Partners in this include people like the NASDAQ. When the NASDAQ says that it's taking APIs seriously and getting involved in the fintech revolution ecosystem, I think it's a signal to the market that you should also take it seriously. So in the UK, we have actually done really well when it comes to creating an environment for fintech to flourish. And I think that the job of government is convening power. So the UK government has actually put together an open banking working group, which actually gives the remit to look at the standards to be created for an API. This journey is a long journey. They recognize that this journey is going to take up to 1 to 2 years. And when the Chancellor of the UK announced in his autumn statement in 2014 that this is something that is very important, it actually also brings it up the agenda for organizations like yourselves. This actually led to a number of industry players, including a number of banks who are in this room, to get together with the industry to create the Open Banking Working Group. And they've now been tasked to outline a number of recommendations on articulating a framework for designing open standards and open data, and they've been given and to also present a timeline for implementation. Why is this important for you in the room? Because government has the mandate to actually set some elements of the agenda, and so as soon as this is finished, I'm sure a number of different people in your organization will be knocking on your doors to say, what are we doing in APIs? And I think the important thing with the Open Banking Working Group is that it brings together fintech innovators, it brings together banks, it also brings together the ecosystem. And we're proud at Level 39 that a number of our companies and stakeholders are involved in this. I thought it may be best to bring together an example. So who has heard of Coinbase.com? So Coinbase.com have had over 8,000 applications started on their APIs. 8,000 is quite a big number. And to actually make sure that developers and those that are using their 4 main APIs are actually engaged at the core of their mission, etc., they have a developer blog, they have a community forum, they're using Stack Overflow, and they're making it integral to the core of their business. When I called the guys in San Francisco and asked them about their story, they said they were API-driven from the beginning. Building their company being API-driven means that they actually use their APIs in their business as well. This shows the real importance for actually having a real integrated approach and not a siloed approach. Last but not least, I wanted to build on a point that Stefan made. So a number of you must know what a hackathon is, and Level 39 hosts one hackathon a year called Hack Make the Bank. And last year, during Hack Make the Bank, we had a hacker who actually used the RBS app to actually create an API interface called Teller. Teller was started about a year ago, and currently, Teller is actually now becoming a real API-driven business. And if you go and ask Stevie, the developer who is involved in this, he will tell you that he came to the hackathon with the goal to actually build off of a great API. And in about 3 weeks, we'll have another API Hack Make the Bank hackathon, and that will involve 10 more APIs from across the banking industry, which will allow developers to come together and solve problems. If you are interested in engaging in that hackathon, do let me know, because we're currently putting out our API call-out. We have Fidor who will be joining that, and I think that it's important to start experimenting, but also to start bringing it to the core of your business. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Adida. So we talked about the current situation. Yeah, give her a warm applause. We talked about the current situation, we talked about the ecosystem, we talked about all the actors within that ecosystem, but I think the last question is obviously an important one. What's next? Where do we go from here? What needs to happen next? So maybe first, as you guys are all experts in the field, what is your thoughts about what is needed to make this really into a big success for banks and for tech companies? Any suggestions? I'll go ahead, Dan.
I think ultimately what has to happen is that banks have to understand that it requires banks to change how they perceive themselves. To really change into understanding that they are software businesses and that they can become dominant platforms of the future and control central elements of the internet, especially around identity and risk management, if they choose to. Or they can choose to be traditional and generate the returns they have been doing over the last several years.
Yeah. And what about the idea that banks have to change their existing back infrastructure to really adapt it towards the front end through APIs? I mean, their legacy systems. Any thoughts on that? Leda, maybe, do you have any thoughts on that?
I will simply reiterate what I said earlier. To become an API-driven business, you need to rethink your stack and your business model. It's not a half-hearted job. I'll just echo what Dan said and what I said earlier. To do this properly, you commit to it fully. You change your back end, your products, you retrain your employees, your language changes. It's a different beast. It can be made up of a lot of the same ingredients of the original organization, but it's a full commitment to doing things very differently.
Yeah, so you basically have to build an infrastructure that tears down all of the silos within your existing banking infrastructure. I think that's a very important part, obviously, if you want to go into this API world. Any others?
I would say having genuine, tangible interest to the core and actually giving the power to the individuals that you give this mandate within your organization enough responsibility and resource to actually execute. There's no point it being a pure marketing exercise.
Yeah. Okay.
So having a strong mandate within your organization to actually drive it forward is critical.
So it really needs to be pushed from the top downwards and not just a couple of developers who want to do that. So I think having support from C-level is something that is required here.
With the realization, just to add to that point, that it will flatten the organization because it comes with a degree of transparency and ownership of the process for those who sit at the controls. That means that you can't go back into a fully hierarchical organizational culture, which most banks would historically have.
Yeah. And what about the fact that most banks are kind of USSR approach, where they have big programs that they run with lots of time and so on, and that now, these days, if technology has to be built, you have to build it very fast and agile and stuff like that. Is that also a change that needs to happen?
Oh, absolutely.
Share it here.
I'm sorry, it's an exercise in self-disruption. It's an exercise in radically rethinking who you are and what you do, and everything that comes with it.
Okay. Stefan, any suggestions?
I say that legislation will force all banks to open their systems to some kind of access. In particular, the European Union forces.
So is that PSD2 that you're
PSD2,
referring
for
to?
example.
Yeah. Okay.
So the banks can make the decision if they just open up the bareness needed APIs to comply with this regulation and to be commoditized somehow, or to create new business models on new service models on new value-added services based on APIs and stay for the future.
Yeah. All right. I think more or less, yeah.
Maybe Chris had a thought?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
The final point I would make is that too often we think of APIs as technology and technology innovation. And the reality is that business model innovation is more powerful in changing and improving our world than technology innovation. And the best technology innovation can only be adopted through business model innovation. And so I think we need to make sure that the leaders of organizations realize it's not about technology. It's about a business model that leverages technology to deliver new sources of value. And I don't think most organizations have the culture to really enable that sort of self-disruption. In fact, we know that most organizations don't. And so the question that was brought up under the future of money discussion is, will the big banks just become big dumb pipes like the telcos have become?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to engage in this cultural revolution that has to take place in order to use technology to enable business model innovation.
Yeah. All right. Well, I noted down a couple of things while I was listening to you guys, so I'm just going to wrap this up. I think it's very clear that APIs are here to stay. It's not something that is just pops up and it's going to disappear. It's something, I think, from a banking industry that people will have to take part of. There's actually a full avalanche of APIs. I mean, it's all over the place, and it allows also to build all kind of services for banks. And I also heard that APIs can potentially even build a bridge between the fintech community, the tech players, if you will, and the banks and the traditional banks, and help convert those traditional banks into a real pipe for these API-driven tech companies. Also heard that the regulator has to play an important role in this, and that obviously PDS2 is going to allow also the backend to be open. And I also heard that APIs can help up speed the process for banking, because these days development goes so fast that the budgets of banks are not capable anymore to do everything. And then by working through APIs and working with that community, you can actually speed up your development that will ultimately get to the end customer, because that end customer is going to get great services through that. And finally, I heard that ecosystems, that's something that came out of it, will be important for the future, that you will have ecosystems of banks working together, potentially banks with tech companies together. So in a word, I think ecosystems will be important and will be the future for banking, and potentially allow banks to take their role again within the financial industry. Okay, so that wraps it up. I have a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, obviously, I would like to thank all the speakers. Chris, thank you. Stefan, Dan, Leda, and Adiza. Two things, what's next? At 2 o'clock, there's the Sibos opening, the plenary room, so I invite you to go there. And at 3:15, there's the killer platforms, Chinese roads to platform disruption. Don't forget to rate the session outside, so you can take a sticker and put it as high as possible, obviously. And don't forget to grab some coffee, and thank you.